bit about myself. I actually, many years ago, got a teaching credential. I was sure that education was the route for me, and then I got my credential and then got called into the family business, which was, of all things, fine jewelry manufacturing and wholesale. It's a little bit different than education. I did that for 31 years. I have been on both sides of the fence. I've been a buyer, buying product from my business. I've also been a seller with a customer base that was pretty broad. Unfortunately, we went through a catastrophic loss and I ended up having to close the business. And so what does somebody do when you've got 31 years of business and running and operating a jewelry manufacturing business with up to 20 employees and an ongoing functioning business? Well, my wife happens to be in education, and she said, well, there's this job in the Human Resources Department of my district. Why don't you check into that? So I ended up getting a job at Mount Diablo Unified in Concord as a personnel manager. I did the recruitment and hiring of classified folks for 2 years until the budget crisis hit them. My position was one of many that was eliminated from their position. And my former boss from the district, who also had lost her job, was hired on as the assistant superintendent of human resources at the school district next to Mount Diablo, which is Pittsburg Unified. And she called me up. She said, well, I don't have a permanent job for you, but I could use some help on a couple projects. Do you want to come work for a little while? And I said, okay. I worked for her for 3 months doing special project development for the HR department there. And when her funding was running out, the assistant sup for business services said, I like what you've done. I could use you for a few months. Do you want to stay and do that? And I said, sure. So I learned a lot of the inner workings of a school district by these 2 temporary positions. When his funding was running out, I was ready to leave, and the position of buyer in the child nutrition department opened up. Now, frankly, I know how to buy and sell pretty much anything that I would need to, but I knew absolutely nothing about food service. I knew absolutely nothing about federal funding, state funding, free and reduced programs, but I had enough buyer and experience that I got the job. And it was my into the district on a permanent basis, and I did that for 3 years. And then a position opened up to handle the accounting for all bond and facilities projects. And like any good business owner, when you have many, many hats that you wear, you can either do HR work or you can do accounting and business services work. And I started with the job title was Special Projects Accountant, and I basically handled all of the financial matters related to bonds and facilities. And then the energy manager for the district decided to retire. And so my CBO came to me and he said, you know, since you handle all these numbers anyway, why don't you take on the data part of what we do, what we track for our energy use? And I said, sure, it's just another use of numbers. So I started my career in sustainability as being the person handling data for PG&E, the city water program, SPUR, just learning the numbers part of it. And then Prop 39 came along and he said to me, well, we really don't have an energy manager now, so why don't we change half of your funding and make you the energy supervisor for the district for half the time? And I said, okay, you know, I'm interested in that. Now, mind you that none of my work experience to that point had to do with energy conservation, sustainability, green technology. I went into the position pretty much not knowing anything other than I'm a consumer and I separate my recycling from my landfill garbage, and I turn my light switches off when I leave a room, and I do the little things that we all learn growing up to help save costs, just help save energy. But the more time I spent learning about what we had started as a district and what my job entailed, sort of filled me and sort of blossomed inside of me until I started reading everything I could find on various things related to energy. And one of the things, well, before I go there, Pittsburg Unified has an ADA of about 11,000. Up until this current school year, we have had an increased ADA each year for the last 5 years, which is different than most school districts. This year, the initial numbers from school starting last week is we were down about 200 students from the previous year, but we were up in the low grades. So we run about 11,300 students in our for our ADA. We have 8 elementary schools, 3 junior high schools, and they are called junior high schools, not middle schools. We have a comprehensive high school, we have a continuation high school. We also have a TK and a pre-K program. We have an adult ed school that is actually going through some positive growth right now. And then our district office and our corporate yard, which is called the Site Support Services Center. And all 6 of the support services are housed in this one area: maintenance, operations, transportation, IT, child nutrition, and facilities are all housed in this complex of a few buildings. All of our schools are located in the city of Pittsburgh, so it's a nice, compact area. We're roughly 5 miles east-west and roughly 4.5 miles north-south. So one of the things that has allowed us is, and I'll go into this later, is use vehicles and transportation methods that don't require long distance traveling. And the key to the start of our whole program and what really drew me in was that we had a CBO whose name was Enrique Palacios, and he was a very forward-thinking, innovative man in his own right. And he allowed me and others in our district and the business side of it to sort of spread our wings and bring things to him that were somewhat out of the box. And as I go through this, you'll see what I'm talking about. When I was first given the data part of it, one of the reasons was we had 15 sites that had solar arrays already built and were collecting their California Solar Initiative money each month, and we're producing. We currently produce roughly 53% of the entire district's needs of electricity from our solar, and that is a huge part of what we do. We have generated in the last in a 12-month period, we generate roughly 5 gigawatt hours worth of electricity. We have saved over, in the 6 years or so that we've had our solar, we've saved over 98 million pounds of CO2 by having the solar. The solar was originally financed by doing a bond for that purpose, and we had, I believe, 66 or 67% in a yes vote when it went to the public. We have a community that has been extremely supportive to bond issues and programs that we've used to build new schools, modernize some of our older campuses. It's been we're an 80, we were actually, last year we were at 84%. This year we're down to, I think, 74% free and reduced numbers. So we are basically a low to low middle income community, but they have been incredibly supportive of all the bond issues that we've had. And we've had, since 1998, I think we've had 5 bond issues, and we have one coming up again in the November ballot. So it's a very supportive community. We've rebuilt or built new, I think 3 elementary schools. We rebuilt our high school. We've added 3 2-story buildings to supplement the high school across the street from where the campus is. We've built 2 junior high schools and tore down 1. So we've had great community support. So solar is a really big part of what we're doing. We are currently at DSA right now in building a new elementary school. Actually, it's replacing an old campus that was built in 1958 or 58 or 64 with a new campus. And the new campus is going to be roughly 85,000 square feet of classrooms and office space. And so when we were in the early planning stages, I went to my CBO and I said, you know, for not a lot of extra cost, we could build this school to be a zero net energy school. And he looked at me and said, what's a zero net energy school? And I said, it's a school that whatever our requirements are for energy and electrical, natural gas, and water, we can offset by having renewable energy. And there is actually a whole recognized organization, the New Building Institute, that actually certifies new, they originally only were looking at modernization projects, but they are so interested in seeing schools that are built that are zero net energy. And he said, how much extra cost? I gave him some numbers. I said, this is an estimate, but our return on investment could be as little as 12 or 13 years. And we're building a school for basically a lifetime. And he said, let's go for it. Now, one of the big points that we all need to deal with on the school district level, and I'm sure these guys can verify this, is that how do you sell the idea of a zero net energy school, or how do you convince a board and a superintendent and the CBO that it makes sense to do something like that? Because frankly, they want to know if it's going to cost us more, what are we getting for our money and how do we pay for it? Well, we have bond proceeds that we're working with. We're going to have matching state funds. But as importantly, we're going to be presenting to our community that we're leaders in being sustainable. And we're going to build an environment for our students to learn about sustainability and energy conservation. And it's a real uphill battle for a lot of districts. If you have a CBO that doesn't see the sense in it, you have to be able to speak to them about the actual numbers. How are the numbers going to work out? For us, making this new elementary school a zero net energy school should have a return on investment of less than 13 years. So my presentation said, if we spend X amount more, we'll see that money back within 13 years in energy savings. And if we do that, then everything after that is a bonus. And he liked that idea. And with his help, we sold it to the superintendent, and then we brought it to the board. And the board, we happen to have a fairly progressive board that is interested in doing the best for the community. And they said, sure, well, let's do it. So we're now at DSA. We hope to have our plans out within the next 60 days, and we will have one of the first new construction ZNE schools in California. Not the first, but there are very few that are out there right now. There were a combination of projects that we had been talking about between myself and the Director of Maintenance and Operations. We'd been talking about for the district. We had a very aged fleet of buses. Our yellow fleet was pretty old. We had a lot of buses that we were spending a lot of time and money in rebuilding motors or having them in the shop getting work done. So we went to the deputy superintendent and said, this is what we see needing, and we gave him numbers, and his thought was, well, this all makes a lot of sense because we're spending all this money fixing buses and all these other projects that you're bringing me. Why don't we go out and do a COP and do a certificate of participation? We'll get $5 million and we'll put it all into energy efficiency and improvements for energy consumption. Now, he was the one that thought about how to actually finance it, and he's the one that had the ability to make the financing actually happen. But with that money, we now are, I think, really way ahead of the game. We have 2 all-electric buses that will travel roughly 85 miles per charge. We have 14 low-emission propane buses, and those buses will give us farther mileage. We use them primarily, the smaller buses, for special ed. We only have 2 diesel fuel buses left in our fleet, and we had to keep those so that if we had field trips that were more than 100 miles round trip, that we would be able to use those particular buses. But otherwise, we don't use them. Around town, we only have 20 square miles that we need to cover for our buildings. And the electric buses normally in one morning's route use about 35 miles. And then they come back to the yard, they get plugged in, they go back out in the afternoon, use another 35 miles, and then they come back and get charged up. We use some of the funding from the COP for a new propane tank and all the infrastructure for it. And then I had a pet project that I brought to the CBO. We have a 1-acre bioswale on our site support services property. It's 1 acre of land that's basically sits there for stormwater retention. And as we all know, the last 5 years, it hasn't gotten a lot of stormwater. But we have to keep this piece of property pretty much as it is, growing with natural growth, weeds, basically, because the weeds are needed to be able to help the water drain into the soil. So we have this 1 acre of land, and it's just sitting there. Well, I've been working with some folks that developed a solar panel at UC Santa Cruz that was originally intended for agricultural purposes. And these are fascinating panels. They're a bright red and black. And when the light hits the panel, the red light that's needed to grow, for vegetation to grow, goes through the panel. And it captures the green light that's needed for PV production. You don't get quite as many, quite as much production per panel as you would of a normal solar panel, but we have this 1 acre of land. We had our groundbreaking ceremony on April 20th. We actually are putting the piers for the panels in next week, and we're putting 1 acre of solar panels that will produce 166 kW of energy to support our Site Support Services Center. the ROI was 12 years on the solar. We're buying it outright. That's what the COP was for. And in 12 years, we'll still have at least 18 years more production coming out of these panels, and they'll be paid for. This was a number that he really liked to see, but he also was open-minded enough to think out of the box and say, hey, this would be a great project to do. And then I put a twist on it. I said, well, you know, the city of Pittsburgh has an average wind speed of 15 miles an hour. I said, why don't we put a couple wind turbines in as well and just generate a little more power? He says, tell me more. So I originally gave him a plan for 2 5 kW wind turbines. And he looked at how much money was left in this COP and he says, hey, you can go 4. I said, well, not only will I go 4, but I think I could do 10 kW wind turbines for not much more than what we were originally going to do the 5s for. And he said, okay, what's the return on investment? Well, these wind turbines that we're doing, they're actually vertical axis wind turbines. They turn in this direction. So they are much more environmentally friendly. They are much less dangerous to birds and wildlife. They only put out, when running at full speed, they only put out a maximum of 40 dB. So they're not very loud. They're basically no different than street side traffic. And they're going to produce another 40 kW of energy for us, including when the sun goes down, because the wind never stops blowing in Pittsburgh. So we actually 2 days ago drilled the holes for the foundations for the wind turbines. They're pouring concrete right now. They start driving the piers for the solar next week. We should have everything up and running by the end of September. If you happen to be up in the Bay Area and you want to come to Pittsburgh to see our solar and wind farm that is different than pretty much anything you've seen in any school, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to give you a tour of what we're doing. More importantly is that we have a project that is going to benefit the district. We're also going to be, when we had our groundbreaking ceremony, we only have one comprehensive high school. We had all 3 environmental science classes come out for the ceremony. They actually, two of the students got to be part of the team of board and principals that put shovels into the ground. We are getting a lot of, we're actually going to be building curriculum around this new project that we're doing so that the teachers can bring field trips over, and we're going to hopefully, I'm working with SEI. I don't know if you're all familiar with them. They're school energy innovators, and they're actually going to be working with me to develop a display of how the whole system is going to work. And then we had a conversation with PG&E because, you know, being in a low to low middle income area, they have lots of money that they're putting out into new programs. So we got PG&E to say, hey, we'd like to help you put bus chargers in. So PG&E is doing the infrastructure to put in 9 electric bus chargers, plus a new transformer and a new meter or a new sub-meter. According to their estimates, they're giving us about $2.2 million worth of time and materials to help build this. All we had to do was supply the actual chargers themselves. They're giving us a 5-year custom-written software program to monitor and tie in with our renewables so that when we're producing too much in the renewables, it automatically will move to the bus chargers. Wow. So our whole cost and we've actually got 6 more buses on order. So we're actually going to be able to charge our buses at a much reduced cost. because we were able to hook up with PG&E. And one of the things that I pride myself on what I do for our district is I'm the one that's out there finding the new technologies, the new innovations, the new contacts. God bless Carl and his organization for having their conference, because 4 years ago I went to my first conference and my eyes went like this when I got to see all the vendors that were there. To me, that was as important as the workshops themselves, to see what vendors were showing, and also what vendors weren't showing, but that I got referrals from, and that I was able to get other information from. I am a huge proponent in my district of going to the conference, not just for the workshops, but as importantly to see whatever new innovations are being out there. 4 years ago there were tons of guys doing LEDs, and I think you were there 4 years ago. And there wasn't really anyone that just stood out, but just seeing the different ideas gave me the idea that we have a football stadium, one football stadium, and it's got the old traditional, halogen bulbs, very expensive, got to be replaced all the time, and just getting a crew on an extended lift up to change the bulbs is a costly proposal. So I was able to get, using our Prop 39 money, and we're waiting for DSA to tell us that the poles that are there are going to be okay. They're going to be less weight bearing, so there shouldn't be any problem. But we're going to change out the entire lighting in our football stadium to LEDs. And I got the idea about doing that. It's the only meter we have at the high school that's not tied into our solar. And I got the idea from being at the conference and actually I overheard somebody talking about stadium lights. Oh, that's a great idea. We need to follow up on this. So, so after we get done with our wind and solar project, there are a lot of other things that we do as a district that I think are a little bit ahead of the game for a lot of districts. As I mentioned, we already have in our fleet 2 all-electric buses. We already have all of our propane buses. Our carbon footprint for transportation is next to nothing now. I was able to work with a company called EVgo. Anyone familiar with them? EVgo is a company that does infrastructure for electric vehicle charging stations. And I was able to get a grant from them. We have 24 EV charging stations throughout the district now, not including the bus ones that we're putting in. And the quote for the infrastructure was about $78,000, and it cost our district $9,600 to have them do all the work. Made me look good. But on a serious note, we've also brought in, we now have 6 Kia Soul all-electric vehicles. Talking about thinking out of the box, our transportation department, one of their main functions is to move special ed kids from their homes to the school sites or to non-public school entities. And so we were sending a bus, a small bus, maybe a 12-seater, 14-seater, but we were sending a bus from Pittsburgh all the way to Alameda, where this one particular student had to go to school. Now we bought a Kia Soul, a used one, $17,000 for an all-electric car in great shape. And instead of transporting them in a diesel bus, we now have a driver that drives a Kia Soul to Alameda and back to take the student to school. Now, it's a really long trip, and we would love to find a closer location, but this program is what this particular student requires. But now our cost of moving the student wear and tear on an all-electric vehicle that you have solar to charge from is next to nothing. With just the salary, we'd have the salary regardless. And then we actually pay the drivers of the cars a little less than the bus drivers because they don't require the bus certification. So two of the Kia Souls go to special ed, or for special ed transportation. One of them goes to our garden supervisor who we have working gardens in all 13 of our schools. So she uses the car to get around from school to school. They're teaching gardens. So she's there working in the gardens and using one of the electric cars for that. Our district courier who does all our mail delivery and some of our catering deliveries, he works out of a Kia Soul. And then the best thing that we've done is for two of the cars, we have taken old beat up trucks that our maintenance guys drive that don't require carrying a ladder or don't require carrying a lot of heavy equipment, and we put them in a Kia Soul. So now they can put their toolbox in the back. One of them is an EMS tech, so he's using a laptop as much as he's using tools, and he rarely has to do anything other than his tool belt. So we've cut the cost of one truck and the use of gas and all the fuel that he requires to using an electric car. And we have a second maintenance guy that's going to be getting one of the cars. They haven't finished deciding who's going to get it, but we're also looking for 4 more to add to our white fleet because the economics show that in a very short time, those cars are going to pay for themselves and they're going to be a whole lot better environmentally and economically than having trucks and buses on the road. My involvement in the district's energy program after the data part came when Prop 39 came around. And one of the things my CBO allowed me to do was to present him with a list of projects that we could spend our Prop 39 money on. As a district over the 5 years, we had $2.7 million of state money to work with. And that's a decent chunk of change, but when you start actually looking at projects, particularly with construction escalation as it is right now, how far can you actually make that go to be effective? So we've used it in conjunction with bond money to be able to make some of these projects a little larger. We've replaced the heating and the HVAC system at 2 elementary schools in total, and the third one is being planned for next summer, all using Prop 39 and bond money. We have changed exterior lighting at 9 of our sites, interior lighting at about the same number. We just did a modernization of an elementary school, and it had indirect fluorescent tube light fixtures. So if you can imagine, 60% of the light, no, 80% of the light went up into these tall ceilings, and 20% came down in fluorescent tubes. The rooms were rather dark, and getting teachers to buy into the idea of daylighting is never an easy task to begin with. So what we ended up doing was putting in all new LED fixtures, all new occupancy controls and lighting controls, obviously meeting Title 24. And we now have these rooms that when you walk in, you got 40 to 50 foot candle in the classrooms because we changed it to 70% down and only 30% up of the light. And we were able to use Prop 39 money for about half the cost. The other thing we did was we applied for and got a 0% ECAA loan. I don't know if any of you are familiar with those, but it's a loan program put out through the California Energy Commission that for school districts, if you got it and you got your projects approved, it was 0 interest over 20 years. on energy efficiency projects. So we were able to use that. The whole key to being successful in innovations in energy for schools, I believe, is finding creative ways to pay for it and design it so that the payback on it fits a general package of 12, 13, maybe even 15 years. If you can show an ROI of 12 or 13 years, you can be successful in making a case for any kind of energy projects you have. If you get past that point, then you have to really find other less tangible ways of selling it. Now for me, one of the things that I always try and build into my proposals for energy projects is how will it affect students, because obviously we're all in schools. The biggest thing that my superintendent is interested in, and the entire ed services part of the district, is how does it work for the students? What do they get out of it? They get a better lighting in their classroom, but kids only need 20-foot candle of light in the classroom to be successful and be able to read what they're working on. So how do you sell that? Well, you sell to the kids and you sell to the teachers the concept that this is sustainable. This is something that's going to save the planet over a period of time. It's really important. Teachers are really hard to break through with this idea. We have occupancy control lights in almost every school, but to get the teachers to turn the lights out when they walk out of that classroom is like pulling teeth. I'm actually trying a whole new approach this year. I'm actually going to visit the schools have minimum days on Wednesdays, and there's a faculty meeting at every school every Wednesday. And this year I'm planning on, instead of trying to speak to teachers on a one-on-one basis as I walk through campus, I'm going to actually go to staff meetings and have a topic to present to teachers. I was able to get the board to adopt a new energy board policy that included them adopting administrative rules for that. One of the things I snuck in that nobody's really said anything about is I've outlawed old mini refrigerators and microwaves. If it's not an Energy Star, you're not supposed to have it. Now, we haven't really tried to fight the battle yet. That's a battle that my CBO has said, are you really willing to climb that hill? Because it becomes a big union issue, and there needs to be refrigerators available for staff. If they can't have one in their room, they got to have one that's big enough that they can accommodate, staff. And so I haven't quite gotten a plan down on paper yet that I felt was sellable, but I do send out emails monthly. I talk, one email that went out, that goes out in October is, are you an energy vampire? Do you actually keep things on 24/7, or do you turn them off? If you have a short throw projector on the wall hanging from the ceiling, do you turn it off when you're done with it, or do you leave it on because it's easier to leave it on than to turn it off and then turn it on and have to wait the 60 seconds for it to warm up? It's really crazy, but I'm sure Ricardo's probably come across this problem. Teachers just, what they're willing to do at home is not always the same thing they're willing to do in their classroom. And that's a big deal. And one of the things we have been able to get across is our recycling and composting program. We actually compost food, leftovers from lunch and breakfast at all of our schools. We recycle them. We put them in a composting bin for our recycling folks to pick up. At 2 of our schools, we actually have composting machines that are out in sheds so that they don't smell too bad. And we use the waste from them for our gardens, so we are being more sustainable. One of our Our district-wide landfill, recycling to landfill percentage is close to 84% right now, which is a really high recycle to landfill ratio. We've had one of our elementary schools win a national award 2 or 3 years ago for the percentage of recycle to landfill that they had. They were awarded by the Keep America Beautiful folks. I think they got a $5,000 check for their efforts on a nationwide contest. All of our custodial supplies are green, either green certified or green and not certified, but we use nothing toxic, nothing harmful to the environment in all of our cleaning materials. We have, crazy, but we have waterless urinals in every male bathroom in the district. Each one of these urinals saves up to 40,000 gallons of water a year. The cost of water, particularly how it's been the last few years, has gone up so crazy that these urinals pay for themselves in a pretty short time. And amazingly, they don't smell. The chemicals neutralize the urine pretty quick. And so you don't always have all these flushes washing down on the urinals. And every school now has them. Every school also has bottle filling stations instead of drinking fountains. A lot of places in the schools, we've put bottle filling stations, and at the 3 junior highs, we've worked in conjunction with the city of Pittsburgh to hand a 24-ounce bottle, reusable bottle, to every 7th grader in the district, so that they can use those bottles on the bottle filling stations instead of bringing plastic bottles to school. We have saved, no exaggeration, probably 100,000 plastic bottles over the last 4 or 5 years by using these bottle filling stations. They're not necessarily economically as feasible, but we sure don't have a whole lot of plastic bottles floating around. And if you go to some schools, you see them everywhere. You know, and how many don't make it into the recycle bin? How many make it into the landfill bins? How many make it on the ground that the custodians have to clean up? These bottle filling stations are tremendous. They give you cold water, filtered water, only the amount that you need to fill the bottle. They have an automatic shut off when the bottle gets to the top. It's great. It's a great concept, and we have at least 2 or 3 at every one of our schools. Our high school has them. The buildings I'm in have it. The district office has one. It's really an important addition to our program. Let's see, what else? Our garden program is a real proud point for our sustainability program. Our garden program was awarded the Golden Bell Award from the California School Board Association for its innovation in teaching students about gardening. It's amazing when you see a kid see a zucchini or a red bell pepper hanging from a plant and realizing that, oh my God, this is where it comes from. This is what it looks like when it's growing. Or an ear of corn on a stalk, or herbs, or all the other things that we grow in our gardens. It's amazing what an educational tool it's become for us. And the garden doesn't see race, it doesn't see color, it doesn't see sex, it doesn't see the differences between one and the other. The kids get down in the dirt and they're digging with a shovel, and they all just really dig it.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. Our district also, 2 years ago, was awarded the Green Ribbon School District Award with gold distinction, which there were that year only 2 other districts statewide that were awarded it. I'm very proud of that award. It actually hangs on the door right outside my door in my office. It is a real labor of love to be able to do the work to get it, and to go through all the efforts. I don't know if Leslie Taylor is going to be at the conference in October, but if she is, she's a great person to work with. You should go introduce yourself if you don't already know her, and talk to her about the Green Ribbon program. It's really outstanding, and in our district, I proudly have that plaque right outside my door so that anyone who comes into my office can see it. It's a real positive. And then lastly, when the water crisis was hitting us a few years ago, I was looking for, I used to scour the irrigation bills and what could we do to cut our irrigation down. And you know, when you go to the conference, there's probably 3 or 4 vendors that all have different forms of irrigation software and hardware that help you figure out what to, how to program it so that you could save water. But we went a step further. There is actually a facility, a sanitation district facility not far from where our district is, and they happen to have a water line of recycled, reclaimed water that runs real close to 2 of our schools, and the 3rd school, the new one that we're building, is also right outside of the pipeline. And so we have added recycled water, reclaimed water to our irrigation at our high school, one of our junior highs, and soon to be at this new elementary school once we get started on it. It is not, don't let anyone fool you, it's not a way of buying water cheaper than buying it from a water district. Because you have to pay a pipe fee to have the water piped and pumped to where you're located. We pay per site. It was $252 a month. We now pay $347 a month to have the water available for us to use. And then we pay 68 cents a gallon, or 1,000 gallon, for the water itself. Now, the cost of the water itself is pretty good, but considering we got to pay these costs when there's no irrigation going on, it does make it a little more cost ineffective. But what it did do was it took many thousands of gallons of water being used that was potable water that could have been going to households or school drinking fountains or other use, and it left it in the system so that we can irrigate our lawns. And because of the minerals that are left in the reclaimed water, our grass is a whole lot greener, a whole lot better looking. It grows much better. It's not a cost-effective savings, but it is an environmental and sustainable major asset for the district, in that we can say that we're not sucking water for irrigation out of the system. We're actually using reused water, and that's a big deal for us. Two other things that we do as a district that I believe are really positive, sustainable acts. One is we're a decentralized purchasing district. What that means is that we don't have a purchasing department. Purchasing is done by individual school sites. It's done by individual departments. We don't take full advantage of our buying power as 14 schools and departments. Instead, we do our purchasing by site. But one of the things I was able to get the CBO to see is that if I started buying copier paper by the truckload, I can get it distributed to all the sites in one day, so it's not sitting in a warehouse, since we don't have a warehouse for it to sit in. And I could buy it at a much better price. Instead of paying $28 to $32 a case for paper, I'm paying $21 a case, $20 and change, up to $22. And so he really liked that idea, and I came up with a methodology so we didn't have to house it. But then I was able to find a paper that was much more environmentally sound. It's not a recycled paper, but it uses 30% more of the tree in its manufacturing, so it needs less trees to produce the paper. It's not quite as glossy as some of the nice domestic paper. It is a domestic made product, but it's not quite as glossy or shiny as the paper that you might want to have. But for a school district, it's great. Costs us 10 to 15% less than any other paper on the market, and it's environmentally sound. It uses more of the tree. There's less waste from the tree, so there are less trees used in the production. And frankly, we buy, for all of our schools and departments, we go through, there's one truckload has 840 cases of paper, and there's 10 reams of paper in each case. So it's 8,400 reams of paper per truckload. We send it out, and we do this 4 to 5 times a year. Because in today's world, a lot of curriculum is actually pulled off the internet and out of computers rather than in textbooks. You know, when I was a kid, we only had books, you know. Even worksheets were on the old mimeograph blue ink machines. You know, I'm definitely aging myself here. But today, teachers use the internet for a great amount of teaching tools. And so the better the environmental impact of all the paper we need to use is, the better off we are. The other thing we've developed is a program called the Idle Free program. Is anyone familiar with it? It's a program that was put together, to my knowledge, with the Bay Area Air Quality Management Board and counties in the Bay Area. And what our little signs say is that if your car is idling for more than 30 seconds, turn it off so that you're not putting more pollutants in the air. And we actually have the kids and staff walking up and down the lines of cars when school gets out and when parents are dropping off. If they're going to sit there for more than 30 seconds, please turn your car off and then start it back up when it's time to move, so you're not polluting the air around the school. And it's just to give a little better air quality for the environment around the schools. So that's my story. How's the song go? Sad and true? No. I would love to open it up if you have any questions or you have any comments that you'd like to